This handy drawstring bag is perfect for going to the beach because it's roomy enough to store up your towels and maybe a magazine or two. In the pockets, you've got 4 pockets around the outside, your sunglasses, your sun creams, and on the inside, I've made a zipped pocket. So for things like your mobile phones and your car keys and things that you want to keep secure. And that's all fully lined as well. So let's take a look at the materials you need, the pieces you need to cut, and then let's get sewing. So just a quick note for cutting circles, if you don't have a 9-inch plate to draw around as a template, these seam gauges are really handy. It's a clover one, they should be available on the Create and Craft website, because you've got a sliding gauge here, so you can put this at your, in this case, 4.5-inch mark. This goes in the centre, put your pen in here, and then you can simply draw around in the circle. So it's worth investing in because you get perfect circles every time. Right, but the first thing we're going to do with the bag is to take the pocket pieces. So I've got one for the outer fabric and one of lining. I've already sewn these 2 pieces right sides together, then pressed them wrong sides together, and this is the bottom seam, that's across the bottom of the pocket. I'm going to put bias binding across the top. So just to help hold these 2 pieces in place whilst I sew, I'm going to give it a spray of 505 spray, which is a repositionable spray adhesive, and that's just going to hold the 2 pieces together. Saves me pinning. My bias binding, it doesn't have to be cut on the bias for this bag because it's not going to go around a curve. So this is just a shop bought bias binding, which I've folded in half and I've pressed. And I'm going to sew this around the open end of the top of the pocket, both at the same time. So literally just wrap the bias binding around the top of the open edge and sew. If you wanted to put some fabric clips on there or to pin it, then that's fine, that's entirely up to you. I'll just cut off my extra tape, and that's my pocket piece finished. So let's put it onto the bag. So I'm taking the large denim piece, and my pocket is going to go about 2.5 inches from the bottom. Just move those out of the way. So you can measure and mark this if you prefer, either with a ruler, or if you've got your rotary cutter ruler and mat, then just lay it across the mat and make sure that the edge is at the same distance either side. So let's just line this up at the 2.5-inch mark and put my pocket there. I will put a few pins in this time, just to keep the pocket in place. And then we'll sew dividing lines. Now I've just made 3 dividing lines, so that ends up with 4 pockets. If you wanted to make more, maybe you wanted a pencil pocket or narrower pockets for whatever reason, then that's entirely up to you. So to mark the centre point here, I'm simply going to fold the whole thing in half and crease, and that's going to be my first dividing line. So make sure it's square, and I'm just going to draw with an erasable ink pen. Like so. So I'm going to sew down here, and then either side of that mark I'm going to measure 7 inches, and we'll have another line either side, and that'll make my 4 pockets. Now just make sure when you are sewing the top of the pockets here that you backstitch a few times just to make that seam really strong. So if you put larger items in there, it's not going to distort the pockets or rip the stitches. So the first thing I'm going to do is to sew straight across the bottom. I'll trim that, my pocket's a little bit big, so I'll trim that down in just a second. I'm just going to put a few stitches across the ends to hold the end of the pocket in place. And on the other side. I'll trim down my pocket as it was a little bit longer for some reason. And then we'll sew the dividing lines. And there's our pocket complete. Now we're going to fold our pocket in half with the right sides together and sew along this open edge to make a tube. And I'm just making sure that the ends of my pocket here meet up, because that's the bit that's going to really notice if it doesn't. So I'm going to put a couple of pins in here so I know that that's in place. And then we'll sew straight down this side. And I'm just using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Right, so there's a tube. Now we need to sew in the base. And I'm going to mark the position of the base in quarters by folding this in half and creasing either side. And you can, if you wish, put a little marker if you can't see the creases perfectly. Then we'll fold those two creases together and crease and mark. With the outside of the bag, I know that that line's in the centre, so I'll use that as one of the marks, and I've just creased opposite there. And then we'll do the same with this section to mark the quarters, and then we'll line those up when we're sewing it together. That'll make sure that the round base sits in evenly. And if you do need to ease it at all, you're only easing it for 1/4 of the circle, which makes it a lot easier to fit. Now we're going to put lots of pins around here. So let's mark up the first two lines like so, and pin. And we're going to do this with all 4 quarters. And then we'll pin it all the way around as well. That's number 3. And there's the 4th mark. Then I'm going to go around again. This may seem really time consuming, but it's worth it to make sure that the base fits in properly. And I'm going to pin in the centre of each one of the quarters to make 1/8. And you can carry on pinning like this as many times as you need to. It's a lot easier to keep pinning like this to make sure that you've got your base in even than it is to just go for it and start sewing. and risk the base not fitting, and then you've got an unpicking job. I think that is fine for now. Now I'm going to sew all the way around the base. So there's the base sewn in. Perfect fit. Let's turn it the right side out and see how we're looking now. So you can really start to see the bag taking shape. So that all needs a press. As I iron that, my heat erasable markings are going to disappear as well, and I'll press the seam flat at the back. But meanwhile, let's get on with making up the lining and the zip pocket for the lining. So I have 2 pocket pieces and my lining piece and the circular base. So take one of the pocket pieces and we're going to draw a box on here, which is where the zip is going to sit behind. So you'll need a ruler and your pen, and we're going to measure a line 1.5 inches from the top, and this is going to measure 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inches across. So there's my top line. Move your ruler down by 1/2 inch and make another line. And then you can join the 2 ends together. Use your ruler if you want to, but that's not difficult. And then we'll have a line straight down the centre of this box. And a smaller line into each one of the corners to create a Y shape at the end. This is going to sit over the wrong side of the lining if you have a right and wrong side, in the centre. So again, I can mark and crease the centre point, mark and crease the centre of the pocket, and place the 2 together. And that will be 3.5 inches from the top here. So that's the top of my bag. That's where my pocket's going to go. You can have that wherever you like. You can make a bigger pocket if you wanted to. Then I'm going to use a very small stitch, a 2 on my sewing machine, and sew all around the outside of the box. So let's take out the pins. Take a sharp pair of scissors, and I'm going to cut down this centre line and into the corners. So cut as close as you can into the corners, but not through the stitches. So straight down the centre here. And across those lines and right up to the stitch. If you don't cut right up to the stitch, then you'll get a little pleat in the corner. Which isn't the end of the world, but looks neater if it doesn't happen. Snip in there. Oops. Snip in there. Then we'll take this lining section and we're going to post it through the hole. How I find this easier, I'll just put my ironing board underneath here, is to press the lining away from the seam first of all. Fold it back and press this one away from the seam. Then we'll post it. This is I call it a letterbox zip. I'm sure it's a placket, but it looks like a letterbox, and because you post the lining through, it acts like a letterbox. Right, let's turn this over. So there's my lining come through. So we need to press it again with that seam right on the edge. And you can see the corners looking nice and neat here as well. Let's stretch it out there. and the second seam here. I've got one pleat in the corner there which will come out if I persevere. But if that happens to you and you do get a little crease there, don't worry, because this is the side that you're going to see. So this is the side that needs to look neat. Put a spray starch, will that make it look nice and crisp if you need to as well. Now the zip goes in here, so let's turn it the right way around for you. So I like to use a basting glue stick, and these are designed for fabric. This is a prim one, Sticks 2 do one as well. And it's important to use adhesives that are designed for fabric for two reasons. This is bright green. It does actually wash out from your fabric. And the second reason is that these are designed to be used with the sewing machine, so it's not going to damage them. I've just sewn together by hand the end of my zip just to hold it in place while I place it down. And that goes over the hole like so. I'm going to turn it over and just arrange this. Oh, it's pretty good actually. Just in case this isn't perfectly straight. And then I'm going to sew all around the outside of the hole. You can put the zipper foot on your sewing machine to do this if you wish. I don't need to on mine. It kind of works with a regular foot. So we'll sew around here, then we'll put the second half of the pocket on. There's my zip in place. Let's turn this over. If your zip is a little bit too long, then you can simply chop the ends off now. If it's a nylon zip, don't cut through a metal zip. Your scissors will suffer. There you go. This is a continuous zip. So they come in a roll and they don't have the stoppers on the end. So it's perfect for projects like this where the ends of the zip are sewn into a seam. I'm going to put a few pins to hold these in place. So all I'm doing here is pinning the two pocket pieces. So I'm not actually pinning the pocket to the lining. These are going to be sewn independently, like so. And then moving the rest of the lining out of the way, I'm just going to sew around the pocket pieces. So there's my lining with, again, the pocket, two sides just sewn together, not sewn to the actual lining. So on the outside, I just see the zip, and then there's the lining behind. So it's all finished off very nicely. Okay, this part of the bag needs to be sewn together in exactly the same way as I did with the outside of the bag. So these two sides sewn together to make a tube, and then I'm going to crease and pin the quarters, then the eighths of the circular base, and sew it together in just the same way as the outside of the bag. And there's the base sewn in. So with the lining part inside out and the outside of the bag the right side out, we're now going to put the lining inside, and we're going to match the seam at the back. So the zip pocket's going to be at the front, and the seams matching just makes it a little bit neater at the back. Right, then we have bias binding to go around the top, but before I put the bias binding in, I'm going to sew the lining to the outside of the bag, and that just makes it easy when you put the bias binding on, because the two pieces of fabric aren't going to slip. So this is going to be sewn really close to the edge because I don't want to see the stitches on the outside, so well within the seam allowance. Just need a few pins to hold those together. Sometimes denim can have a little bit of stretch in it. So just try and make sure that you don't pull one fabric, particularly if you've got one stretch and one's woven, because that's when things can start to distort a little bit. Okay, so again, about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, just so around the top. And I can have a longer stitch on this as well, because this is just like a tacking or a basting stitch. I'll just trim away, got a couple of threads there that need to come off. And then I'll put the bias binding around the top. So I like to start and stop applying bias binding in an inconspicuous place. So that's going to be the seam at the back. So I'm going to start off by folding the end of my bias tape over by just about 1/4 of an inch, just to make that neat. I'm going to wrap this around the top of my bag, just like I did with the pocket earlier. But I'm going to start sewing about 1/2 inch from that folded end, so I can tuck the remaining end back in again when I come back to the start. So that's how I am at the moment. The last thing I need to do is to put the eyelets around the top to make the drawstring. So I've already measured and marked 2 inches either side of my back seam. I want to avoid putting an eyelet straight over that back seam because it's just too thick. It's going to be awkward. And then to make, I'm going to have 8 eyelets. To make the same marks on the opposite side, my seam's in the centre. I put a couple of pins through here, and I'm going to put a mark there. And these are measuring 1 inch from the top. So I know those two are evenly spaced. Then let's open out the bag. I've got my crease line already, which is the centre point. And I'm going to do the same on this side. So 2 inches, 1 inch down from either side of my centre point. Do you see that? Push the pins through in the same way, and then mark on this side the same position. And a chalk pencil is ideal for these. So I've got evenly spaced markings all the way around. Okay, now obviously your instructions are going to differ depending on what brand of eyelets you're going to use. But this is generally how you're going to do it. There'll be a lot of banging in just a second. This is a prim eyelet set. So you'll have a tool like this, and one side is a sharp bit which makes the hole, and this side squishes the eyelet together. So the first thing to do is to make the hole. So you'll also have a little plastic stopper to put behind there to stop you damaging your table. Put the cutter over the top of your mark and bash it. Quite hard. If it doesn't go all the way through first time, you can actually see the outline there that I need to cut. So I'm just going to snip this away. And then we'll need to turn the bag over. The half of the eyelet with the deep rim is going to go from the right side of your bag and through the hole. And then you'll have a ring which goes on the back. Place that over the top like so. And then the domed bit of your tool, this section, sit it over the top of the rim and bash it. And there you have your nice neat eyelet. So I'll do that with all 8 eyelets, and then we're ready to put the drawstring in. I do think with any kind of metal hardware like this, it really gives your bag a professional looking finish. I think this is looking really good. Then the final thing to do is to take your cord, and I'm just using, it's like a stretchy cord, this one, but you could use a piping cord. That would look very nautical, or even a piece of ribbon if you don't have anything to hand and you don't want to buy anything. So we'll thread in and out and in and out and back to the beginning. Then I'm just going to pull my cord through evenly, and I'm tying the ends in a knot. You could put toggles on the end if you wanted to. I'm just going to trim those off. And that's my bag finished. And I can draw the string up to carry it or to hang it at the back of a door, and I'm not going to the beach. But all I need to do now is to put my towels, my sun cream, my sunglasses and my reading matter inside, and I'm ready to go. So I hope you enjoy the tutorial. I hope you love the bag. I hope you enjoy making yours, and I hope you enjoy your holidays.